When I was 11 years old, my mother told me a story about her experiences growing up in Iran. She had always dreamed about being a scientist, specifically physics. When she was my age, when doing entrance exams for university, she was rejected. Not because of her grades, not because of her capability to do physics, but solely because of her gender. The university of her choice told her that they only had a small number of females that they could accept onto a physics course, and told her to maybe try something like art, literature, or business, subjects that were more suited for her. The shocking thing for me, however, was that she told me she wasn't entirely surprised. You see, women in Iran are used to inequality. They attend football games, go to the beach, or even have the freedom to dress as they please, as these luxuries are reserved for men. Today, modern justice systems have come so far. With the decreasing gender pay gap, more female involvement in politics, and an increased number of female appointments to the bench, we can easily say that society as a whole is constantly pushing for gender equality and condemning gender discrimination. But what if I told you that our fight for equality under law and in society has made us lose touch with when it is actually? If I told you that complete equality, something that we have all needed so badly, is actually not needed in some circumstances? What if I told you that equality, without considering the context of women's lives, is useless? One example of where total equality is detrimental to women is in the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system treats men and women completely the same, with gender-neutral laws, sentencing, and procedures, ignoring the fact that gender plays a critical role through differentiating male and female needs. I want to shine a light on only one part of the criminal justice system, which I believe needs much reform. A part that has treated people I know, people I love, with great injustice: the prison system. My auntie Sharare was my age, 17, when she was thrown into prison shortly after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, purely for being a woman who took part in a peaceful protest for the protection of freedom and basic rights. A strong and vocal woman, someone so determined to make a name for herself before prison, soon turned into a dark and tragic manifestation of the male-dominated prison system. She was beaten, raped, and tortured inside the four walls of her prison cell until her voice was completely silenced when she got out. You see, growing up visiting Auntie Sharare, I could not believe that she was once a strong and independent-minded woman, someone who took part in protests, fought for her rights, and cared deeply about her education, because her time in prison, even as a 17-year-old girl, destroyed her mentally. So much so that she continued to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorders all throughout her life. Listening to stories about my Auntie Sharare's experience really inspired me to look into the structural and systemic problems of prison systems and how they impact women's lives. I began to see a trend with women's incarceration and post-prison trauma. Her experiences in prison and what it did to her allowed me to come to the conclusion that the prison system may treat women equally, but in prison, equality is not what women need, and I'm going to explain why. The backbone of our justice system that has been suited for male prisoners has equally been applied to female prisoners. This is because, until recently, criminological theory and research has focused on explaining male criminality, with males seen as the normal subjects of criminology. Indeed, the view of many judges today, as Helen E. Kennedy once put it, is, you want equality? Well, you'll get equality. They take insufficient account to the fact that women are still the primary carers of children and other family members. They ignore the way women are still discriminated against in the job market and fail to see that the sentencing system is formulated with men in mind. The organization Women in Prison reports that women, ironically, sometimes even receive harsher sentences than men because they are mothers. They may be unsuitable for community service because they have young children, but then the courts, unable and unwilling to come up with an alternative punishment, send them to jail. This is a prime example of how judges do not know how to deal with women and just blindly treat men and women equally without taking into account the context of women's lives. But why settle for less? Why not make the justice system cater to women's needs? Why not make the justice system conform, rather than women to conform to the justice system? Clearly, the use of male standards to measure equality means that women will always lose. What is equally baffling, however, is that women's rate of incarceration has not matched women's rate of criminality, making the increased number of female prisoners somewhat unjustified, and further showing deep-rooted issues in the criminal justice system. In recent decades, the number of women in prison and under criminal justice supervision has increased dramatically. Just to give you an example, according to Home Office statistics in the UK, on the 2nd of July 2004, there were 4,475 women in prison. Yet in 1994, this figure was only 1,811. However, what if I told you that the dramatic increase in the number of female prisoners is not justified? This is because, shockingly, nearly 2/3 of women currently in state prisons are serving for non-violent offences, mostly property and drugs, with non-violent drug offences being the overwhelming majority of cases. In many cases, even the justice system has realised that they've made a mistake sending women to prison for their minor offence. In fact, 2/3 of women who enter custody in a year are on remand, meaning that they're yet to be convicted. Of these, 58% do not receive a custodial sentence, and 1 in 5 are acquitted altogether. Just to put it in perspective, if all the females in the audience went to prison, 1 in 2 of you would be in prison without a real conviction, and 1 in 5 of you would be freed altogether after the judge realizes that you're actually not meant to be there. So clearly, it is obvious that women should not have been in custody in the first place, but the question as to why this is happening is rarely asked. So you may wonder, if the cases of 1 in 5 women are acquitted anyway, is there really an issue? The answer to that question would be yes, because prison has had some dangerous consequences for women. According to the Prison Service Safer Custody Group, 15% of all prison suicides are committed by women, even though they only make up 6% of the daily population. 2/3 of women suffer from mental health problems, and 1 in 3 women suffer domestic violence while serving their prison sentence for their minor offence. Personally, I see little value in imprisoning those whose offendings is rooted in sexual problems, but this does not entirely surprise me, given that our call for gender equality has led to a literal interpretation of equality without considering the context of women's rights. It makes me wonder if incarceration for females with drug and substance abuse issues is even the right step to take. The first step to solving the systemic problems of the justice system towards women, I believe, is to accept that in some circumstances, complete equality is not needed. As a society, we need to accept that gender plays a critical role throughout the criminal justice process. If attitudes do not change, then systemic reform is impossible. Although the importance of total equality is invaluable in certain sectors of society, such as in employment, education, and politics, in the prison system, equality with no context of women's lives and the difference in women's needs is detrimental to women's advancement. Criminal justice practice should be improved by addressing women's pathways into the justice system, their difference in offence patterns from the patterns of male offenders, their experience in the criminal justice system, and their response to programs. With drug and alcohol abuse issues being the overwhelming reason women are in prison, we maybe have to take a step back and re-examine if incarceration is even the best option for women. Looking into the future, it is so important to throw away the backward belief that women shape up to the very male structure of the criminal justice system. We must embrace the differences in female and male prisoners and make the justice system conform to this. It gives me chills to think that my Auntie Shara was exactly my age when her life was destroyed by the harsh realities of the prison system. To think that fighting for her personal freedoms gave her nothing but a life full of post-traumatic stress and a silenced voice. Thinking about her stories often makes me grateful for how far society has come. Lucky to be able to live in a place where women are accepted in so many sectors of society. But we must not forget that although there are so many areas in which total equality is needed and necessary for women, there are also areas in which equality, without no real context of women's lives, is useless. Thank you very much.